Welcome to Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast where innovation isn't just an ideal, it's a way of life. I'm your host and creator of the Innovate, Disrupt, or Die newsletter, Danny Nathan. Hello, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast. This week, I have Dr. David Freed with me. David, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us.
Danny, thanks so much for having me. Really excited. Big fan of the podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited too. Based on our quick conversation previously, I think we're going to have a little bit of fun here. So I'm going to start off with the easy question, David. Tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and how it relates to the world of innovation.
Yeah, I've been in innovation and continuous improvement for a little over 20 years now. I was the 8th corporate employee of Massage Envy. And so we were innovating a brand in an industry, all of the membership-based things that you see nowadays. Only gyms were that way when we started. So we created an industry and created a brand at the same time, which was really great. And, that thread has just kind of continued through my career, working in government, supply chain and logistics, customer experience, and technology now, where all of those things led me to culmination of a doctorate in industrial organizational psychology or business psychology, but focusing on innovation. It is. We wanted the longest title possible. We all voted. My topic was creating a model for disruptive innovation based on Christensen's theories. So I got to study a lot of really exciting leaders and watch what they do.
I'm so looking forward to learning more about all of that. Before I get too much further, though, you mentioned that you've spent a long time focused on innovation and continuous development, right?
Yeah, continuous improvement. So mostly
continuous improvement. Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Talk to me a little bit about continuous improvement and what you mean by that and how it differentiates from the innovation that we talk about.
Yeah, no, I love that question, and I get that question a lot. So I'm a Six Sigma practitioner. My father-in-law was actually the guy who created Six Sigma. So that's kind of what
you got it in.
Really, it was really great. All of our dinner conversations and Thanksgivings were nerd out sessions. So Lean is about reducing waste. Six Sigma is about reducing variation. You remove variation, you get more repeatable quality or repeatable outputs, and hopefully they're high quality. And so when you get high quality things that you can do very often, that type of thinking and those types of systems lead to really high satisfied customers and what I actually like to drive toward, which is fanatical customers. I want those people like you see on Monday Night Football with the face painted and all of that.
Yeah.
So that's the continuous improvement side. And as I mentioned, I'm a subscriber and practitioner to the late Dr. Clayton Christensen's disruptive innovation theory. And he talked really about 3 different ways that you innovate. And it's, creating something completely brand new, or taking something and adding new features to it that makes it essentially a new product or a new service. And the third is creating something in a way where you can actually open up a brand new market to it. So it can either be reducing costs or finding a different application for the same thing, right? So that's how I define innovations. In a world that's ever changing, you can't do the same thing for a year and expect that was good quality on day one is going to still be good quality at the end of the year because the world changes, right? And a lot of things change that we have no control over. Continuous improvement is saying this is what has changed. This is how we're going to improve. Innovation is, this is what is going to happen. I'm going to proactively change to be there when that change occurs. I'm going to proactively develop a new product or create a new service or do this thing so that I am either meeting or beating the market to that segment. So that's innovation to me is more proactive. So that's how I differentiate the two.
Interesting. There's a lot of nuance there. I kind of have 2 questions, I think, that come out of that, David. One is, as you were describing continuous improvement, the first thing that came to mind was sort of the incremental innovation and the idea of, okay, how do we keep making this thing just a little bit better and a little bit better to keep up? Whereas, we think about disruption is much more of the how do we crack a new market or how do we change this thing entirely so that it becomes something new. Is that relatively aligned to what you're describing?
It really does.
Okay. Great. That leads to my next question then. For somebody who hasn't sort of spent the time that you clearly have thinking about the differentiation between the two and the nuance there, talk to me a little bit about how the activities that serve either innovation or continuous improvement look. Like tactically, what would I do within a business that would qualify as continuous improvement versus innovation? And then, sort of within that, how do you structure the people to serve those varying needs?
Yeah, such great questions. That really is like that is leaders' behavior toward creating innovation and
Hmm.
toward driving continuous improvement. So if there's one thing I could hit on, this is it. So, like I said, a lot of continuous improvement is backwards thinking. So, what that looks like is you're bringing in data, right? You're bringing in the voice of the customer. So, whether that's survey feedback or um, quantitative data and performances and things like that, and you're looking at them and saying, okay, what are we doing well? Where are opportunities to improve? No, we're starting to see this same complaint happen over and over again. We need to do something about that. It's those incremental things that you can do. And again, that's very tactical and very intentional about how
Hmm.
you're looking at the customer experience and scrutinizing the process by which you create that experience, right? And so you have people that are speaking directly to your customers. You have data or the actual voice of the customer. If you have survey responses or
Hmm.
quotes or online comments from social media, all of those things, you're bringing together leaders or practitioners from your different teams. So say you're working on a piece of software. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So as you're explaining it, I'm envisioning that the world of continuous improvement sort of lives in the gray area between like a customer success team and a product team, where, if customer success is gathering and sort of comprehending all of the data around customer feedback and the problems that people are articulating, and then sharing that with a product team to kind of say, hey, okay, here's what we're seeing over time. Here's kind of the percentage of the surveys that are saying this versus that. And here's what we can do about it to then improve the product based on that feedback. Is there anybody else that kind of plays in that system?
Yeah. So, and first off, you're right. That gray area exists. I like that in the middle of that Venn diagram. And I think you also, in addition to product, you also need that financial stake at the table and you need that
Yeah.
leadership stake at the table, right? If
Okay.
leaders aren't bought into really critically observe or critically looking at their product and saying, we know we're good, but we can do better and we expect better, then the people won't take it seriously as well. So I think
Right.
those are the four main categories of group that sitting around a table. And if they're really taking that critical eye to the product and to the how the customers are responding to that, how you're meeting expectation, hopefully exceeding it, then that's where continuous improvement can happen.
How do you find that companies structure the rigor around continuous improvement? If somebody had called you in and said, and they say to you, Dr. David, we need your help examining our business to figure out where there's opportunities for continuous improvement. What kinds of things are you pulling together? What frameworks do you have that companies can use to repeatedly evaluate and understand to begin to benchmark where we're starting on this sort of path of continuous improvement and then where we want to go? And I have more thoughts and questions, but I'm going to let that sit for a minute so you can answer.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm a Six Sigma practitioner. I know, and I'll debate anybody who wants to chat about that in a different time. But the methodology works. And so it starts off really um to one, ensuring that you've got the right people invited to the room, but by really defining what you're trying to do. Defining, even if it's just we don't know what our current product experience or customer experience is, and we need more clarity around that. Or we've seen a decline in sales or
Mm,
service add-on purchases or anything along those lines, right? When there's a change in those top level metrics, diving into the bottom level metrics, which is where then you transition from define to measure, right? So the next step in
yeah,
the phase is to measure, and that's about benchmarking. That's not about figuring out where to get improved, but you got to understand where you're starting from,
right.
right? And then you get into the analyze phase, and that's all about diving into those deep metrics and figuring out truly like what is your throughput capability? How good are you at doing that one thing at every step of the process and really nitpicking that? And it's not nitpicking people, it's nitpicking the capability of the process to happen,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
so
Is
you
the
go from
process capable of expansion more so than the people within it?
Exactly. And once you have all of that on the table, so you define this and you say, yeah, we have the right stuff and we have the right people at the table. We understand where we are today and we know everything about our process that we can know because we just dissected every piece of
Yeah.
data we have. Then you can create an improvement plan. You go through and you figure out like, what does that future state look like? And you put it into the improve phase and then you go into your control phase and you say, this is how we're measuring success. And this is what we're going to track. And then that process is also cyclical. So one thing that innovation and continuous improvement have is their cycles. They can never stop.
So, David, that brings to mind another question. I often think of efficiency and innovation within an organization playing a bit of a tug of war. And, even Christensen, of course, talks about how as companies optimize towards efficiency, they sort of inherently move away from the ability to be innovative. And yet, it sounds to me like a lot of what you're describing around continuous improvement is focused on achieving efficiency. You just described the cyclical nature between innovation and continuous improvement. How do these efforts towards continuous improvement not hamper your ability to then be innovative because you're so focused on improving towards efficiency?
Yeah, first off, you're absolutely right. There is that paradigm, and I don't know if it's necessarily a tug of war, but I do like how you summed it up of what Christensen said: is you go toward one side, you lose the other. So that's actually so shifting then to um, my practical application, my model for a practical application of Christensen's theory.
Uh-huh.
The first couple steps are the same. You've got to get the right people in the
Interesting.
room, and you
Yeah.
have to cultivate a space where people can be honest and they can share ideas and concepts, and particularly those people who are directly interacting with the customers. So, one of the other things in preparing an organization for disruptive innovation, so you have to have the right people at the table. You've got to have a space where people are willing to share those things. You have to have an organization that can freely share ideas and concepts easily. So you need those three things. And then the fourth thing is where this bridges and begins to become completely about innovation. And that is a phenomenon called organizational ambidexterity. And what that is, imagine a teeter totter or that sliding scale where on one side is efficiency and on the
Hmm.
other side is flexibility and agility. We've all heard fail fast, right? Sometimes that gets really expensive. So
Yes.
so finding that kind of balance between, well, we can do something well, but we have not only the physical organizational structure, but the mindset of we have this today. If we walk in and we have an idea, we're going to go pursue this innovation. We may have to completely disrupt everything that we're doing and or how
Yeah.
we're doing everything in the structure. We're going to move people around. We're going to change teams up. We're going to pull resources from here and put them to there. And that flexibility and agility is sometimes really challenging for people.
Yeah.
So I like to say on the extremes of either one of those two things are detrimental to organizations. And
Like the sort of teeter-totter analogy, because you can immediately see where, oh, okay, if I lean too far this way, then something breaks over here.
yes, 100%. And what it ends up being is really not trying to find that perfect balance, but being able to ebb and flow enough in the middle, that section where you're kind of going back and forth between the two, where people know how to learn quickly into efficiency rather
Yeah.
than fail, learn quickly into efficiency, but be in a place where they're constantly changing, evolving, challenging things that they're going back and forth. And it's almost like a daily, you hop back and forth from that middle point every day or every week,
Yeah. I
you
picture
know?
somebody surfing as you're describing it.
Yes, yes, that's a great analogy. I love that visual. Yeah, so that's where they really kind of blend because again, companies, projects, products will go under when they get too far to one of those extremes where it gets
Yeah.
too expensive to buy your way out of your mistakes, or where you're too efficient that somebody comes in and disrupts you and you're now out of the business, right? So it's kind of that jogging back and forth between the two. Um, and then that leads into being able to actually get things to market quickly, and keep that cycle going. So that's really that model of what leaders who are good disruptive innovators, that's what they do. And they're willing to accept a certain amount of risk, but also understand that balance and how to achieve that and how to keep their people feeling comfortable in that state, right? Like, how do you feel confident in your
Yeah.
job when you're not sure your job will be
Yes.
your job in 2 weeks? You might have to have changes to your job, right? And that's really
Yeah.
unsettling for some people.
Yes, and there's a couple things that come to mind there, David. One, as you're talking, a lot of what you've described, so right people at the table, a willingness to share, an organization that is built around the ability to share easily, and then that sort of ambidextrous surfing teeter-totter moment, all of that to me, if you were to sum it up, sounds a lot like what I tend to refer to as a culture of innovation. And how do you build a workplace culture that is capable of enabling the four things that you've just described? And so I guess within that, I'm curious, what does a culture of innovation mean to you? And how do you encourage organizations to achieve the four things that you've just described? Because I mean, it sounds like it can be scary. And, the other side of people being uncertain about the future of their job, as you've described it to me sounds fantastic of like, I don't know what I'm going to be doing next week, but it's going to be fun. But a lot of people also view that as, I don't know if I'm going to have a job next week. This isn't fun. And so I guess my question revolves around, what does a culture of innovation mean to you, and how do you build that culture so that people become comfortable with the potential of change, but not fearful that that change is going to impact them negatively?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest questions that I get asked as well. If you walk up and down companies all over the place, right? You're going to see a lot of those things in their core values or in what they do, right? But watching it in practice, there are several leaders that I've worked with that were very fearful of, what is this going to do to my P&L? Like, the board isn't going to like this, or I just need more data. And they sit in that analysis paralysis mode. So when a leader is willing to bring people to the table, give them a safe space to share those ideas, get rid of the complexity of you need to copy your boss's 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 boss, understand that they're living in a world of there will be some uncertainty here, but we've hired really intelligent people that are excited about what we do and committed to doing great things. When that truly lives in the organization, innovation can happen. And if you launch it and you're looking at how your customers are reacting to it, if it's not favorable, the response is to say, this is what happened. We expected this outcome. We got that outcome. Why?
Yeah.
And
What did
approach
we
it with the
learn from it?
curiosity. Exactly.
Yes.
That's what that looks like. It's on leaders. Most employees are really good at this and they like being in these environments. The ones that are skeptical about it are typically those that have been burned. People then want to gravitate more towards the efficiency side because
Hmm.
I know exactly what I'm coming into. I know exactly what's expected to me, if expected of me. If I do it, I will be okay. I will have my job. All is well, right? And so you move away from innovation to efficiency. The last thing I would add to kind of the innovation side, right? So we talked continuous improvement. We talked kind of how it bled into innovation. One of the key components of innovation is the spin rate. And
Okay.
that is, imagine putting something in the dryer, right?
Yeah.
And you have those times where the dryer is going around like this, and then you all of a sudden it hits that time where it's just whipping around like crazy. That happens in markets today. And even like the education industry and government that have been notoriously slow to innovate or change, the advent of AI has sped them up.
Yeah.
And so spin rate is the other element. And then there's innovation metrics. Are you measuring your innovation specifically, not
Hmm.
in, your EBITDA or your number of units sold or anything
Right.
else, but how much innovation are you churning out comparatively to the remainder of your book of business? So you have a portfolio of products. What is the ratio of new innovations comparatively to your existing portfolio? Because inevitably, some of your portfolio will die off or should die off. Going back to your high level question, that's how you practically apply continuous improvement and innovation in the same environment as a leader and as a practitioner, how you hope your leaders would look at this
Yeah.
and want you to be and want the environment within the organization to be. And honestly, you're finding some of the companies that don't do that as much as it is the Amazons of the world. They're slowly succumbing to other providers out there because they have not truly innovated as much as others in the world have. And so it's interesting.
It's absolutely interesting. I want to circle back to something that you mentioned a moment ago, David. You were talking about when leaders hit that moment of analysis paralysis. So
Yeah.
I'm worried. What is this going to do to my P&L? How am I going to keep people happy? How am I going to placate the board, et cetera? How do you answer that for those people? Do you have a go-to argument for, well, no, stop, think about it this way?
Yeah. My go to question is always, what happens if you don't?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's somebody else out there. Tell me three companies in your market that are having this same discussion right now. Can you afford not to? And what happens if you don't? So yeah, that's the really simple one, and that conversation tends to go on for about an hour or so.
Okay.
But it's really just understanding then, okay, I'm also not advocating for you take every idea, you throw $1 million at it,
Sure.
but there's that process. And that's why you need to have a diverse group of people at the table that represent all of the different perspectives. And that's diverse from roles, responsibilities, level in the company, gender, nationality, all of these things, because everybody sees things differently. And so when you bring that to the table, and when you can have one of my favorite exercises in the very early stages of the innovation cycle, right? I also do this in continuous improvement. It's one of the few that can bridge the two. Is the Six Sigma term for it is failure testing, but I like to call it risk busters. So we've all seen myth busters, and they go to bust the myth, and then they do something completely outrageous, right? Mythbusters is we're going to take this idea, and once we've kind of vetted it through and people are talking through it and there's consensus that, yeah, we really think they're onto something here, we all walk away and come back 2 days later. And I say, I want you to come back with 3 to 5 reasons this is going to fail. And don't just go for the obvious ones. Like we all know, like list them fine, but I want 3 to 5 that are like the peripheral, like nobody would see it coming.
Yeah.
And we reward the best ideas. The goal is to say, great, now we know how it's going to fail. Is it still worth it? And two, great, now we can plan to make sure the failure doesn't happen.
Yeah, that was my next question. Was I assume then that the output of the exercise ultimately is, so how do we not let that happen?
Exactly. And so that's on the innovation side, you come up with some really cool stuff. Like people really push that envelope, and you end up innovating harder than you thought you were going to in the first place. And that you sit and you look at that and you say, wow, like, okay, this is really impactful. Like we're now creating something completely different. And what do we need to support that? And then you start those questions, and then you blossom into a new product or service.
So as you're going through that exercise, David, what happens when you get to the point of, this is great, we've got a brilliant idea, it's going to change the world, but we have no idea what to do with it?
Yeah, that happens a lot. And as you mentioned, there are several solutions, much like, something as simple as, and I say as simple as, we don't have this functionality or this capability. We need it. Let's go
Go
find
hire.
somebody who does it. Right. So we either hire, we go buy a company that does it, we find an outsourcing company that does it, something along
Yeah.
those lines, right? There's also sit there with it and you watch and you wait for it to happen, and you look for emerging markets and technologies and things, right? Even in things that are unrelated. And hey, that's what we need. We just want to apply
Let's
it in
go
a
find
completely
that
different
person and
way.
talk to them.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's just waiting around and keeping your ears open and saying, if we can't move at the rate of speed that our spin rate is going, because we have one of these things slowing us down, capability, whatever else, we're going to move that to the side and work on that piece. What we also are addressing other innovations. So it's not like one at a time type of a thing. You look at this next thing like, okay, and that's where the last piece of you've got to be able to launch something. You
Yes.
can't sit there too and innovate something over 6 years, because what you started with won't be what you end up
Won't be,
launching,
yeah.
won't be worth it. Right. So you keep doing that, and you keep iterating over time, and you bring that up, and you're having those conversations while you're also innovating in other ways in things that you can do.
Do you have other favorite examples of companies that you think exemplify this mindset that you're describing?
Wow, that's a really great question. One of my favorites, and just because I've watched it from almost inception, is Orange Theory Fitness.
Oh, okay.
David Long, who's now the chairman of the board, former CEO up until I think a few months ago or close to a year ago, he was a colleague of mine at Massage Envy. And so he saw into the future, and coming from the gym industry, as so many of us did,
Hmm.
we understood the mindset of people walking into the gym. And so he knew his customer intimately. And he also brought people that knew customers intimately to the table. And then he brought people that were passionate about health and fitness and asked them, like, what is it that is going to make a difference and an impact? And where he really innovated and exemplified this, and frankly, Orange Theory still does a lot of their corporate officers and their structure and how they operate revolves around this. They're constantly looking at how do we make this something where it's a part of people's life every day, not just when they're in the studio. He really, over time, continued to push the limits of starting with classes, starting with culture, starting with people first, and then continuing to layer in and never be satisfied with the technologies that they were offering. Going back to your culture piece as well, their annual conferences, you will be hard pressed to find a culture that does not just absolutely love each other the way that that group does. So I think, Orange Theory Fitness is one of my favorites, I think, from that, because they are health and wellness company, a people centric company, both internally and externally, and a technology company. And when
Yeah.
you look at that, like, to be successful in all three of those areas, and how they've done it is just been remarkable to watch.
That is not what I would have expected as an example. In our intro call, David, you mentioned that you're working on a book, and you mentioned that you have identified, if I remember correctly, I think it was two unique ways to measure the impact of innovation and 11 traits that great innovators exemplify. Without obviously giving away the like punchline of the book, can you talk more about that? What have you discovered? What's interesting, and what do we all need to be tracking and doing more of?
Yeah, happy to share that. Yeah, book coming soon. Really excited. I think the six things that we talked about earlier, the last three or the last two are metrics. So it really leaves nine, but the six most important we've talked about, right? So bringing the right people to the
Okay.
table, and all of the diverse perspectives, having that safe space to do that, getting rid of the bureaucracy and things in the organization, and really making sure that that information can flow properly, the organizational ambidexterity, having a clear, that culture of we're going to be okay, not necessarily knowing that,
Yeah.
living in ambiguity part, and then launching and getting things out to the world. So with those being the high level steps, the two metrics that go along with that are ratios. And so one of them is a count and one of them is a revenue piece. And it's, what is your new innovation ratio, your innovation count, and then the revenue you've generated from that against your other book of business.
Gotcha.
And so, as you can imagine, those numbers are relatively small. And it all depends on that spin rate, right? Technology companies should be doing anywhere between two and six innovations a year, depending on what they're doing, especially in this world of AI, right? Where government, entities and things, most would tell you it's a 1 to 2 year thing. And
Yeah.
I would challenge that. But those ratios tell you a lot. You can put out a large count ratio, but if your dollar ratio isn't also performing that way, and it's not necessarily going to be an instantaneous thing, right? But looking at that and seeing kind of the rate of change and the rate of growth of both of them, the dollar informs how the
Hmm.
process is going. And
Sure.
the count, just because you're putting it out there, your dollar tells, how people are reacting to it. And you're constantly looking at the market and bringing those people to the table. But those are really the two ways that, if you're measuring those two elements specifically for, are we innovating? Are we challenging ourselves to do this? Are we making this an intentional piece of our day? Then, and what are we getting from it? Those are the good indicators. So they're really simple. My work was a passion of mine because it was taking a lot of the ideas that existed and putting it into a framework. As I read, I noticed this trend and did research. And honestly, I didn't have a topic yet, but I was curious about innovation and continuous improvement. And I was reading about them. The same things kept coming up, but nobody was talking about all of them. And so that was the gap. So I just put them all together and then went
Got
out
it.
and talked to a bunch of leaders and measured their innovation rates using those two metrics, and the number of steps that they complied with, and their spin rate, and how they did it, how their meetings were structured. And those that did more of those steps and did them more frequently had higher innovation metrics for both of those. And those that didn't. There wasn't a single person that was an outlier that was in the opposite group. And so it was really cool. But that's where the cycle comes from. And then of course it repeats over and over and over again.
For the metrics that you're describing, particularly the kind of innovation count, how do you go about counting innovation? In the world that we're describing, where a company is accomplishing 2 to 6 innovations in a year, we're sort of leaning in the world of kind of big I innovation as opposed to little I innovation, or I'm thinking about it, and this sort of leans into the continuous improvement side of things. How do you draw the line between an innovation that is really sort of a continuous improvement versus an innovation that like is worthy of a tick mark on my 2 to 6 count?
Yeah. A couple different ways to check that. One, those meetings where you're looking at innovations need to be a meeting where you're just looking at innovation. So you're not saying this is what our existing product offering is or anything else. It's
Mm-hmm.
this is what's existing in the market today. Here are customers we don't have. Here are customers we do have. Here's other ways we think we could apply our existing product line to what we're doing. Um, Really just blank whiteboard type starts. So that's one way. As you're going through it, if you go, oh, we have this existing product that might work if we do this little tweak to it here or there, I always fall back on Christensen's definition. Um, is this something where you're taking and you're creating a new product, or are you just making a tweak to your existing product
Yeah.
to make it achieve that customer expectation a little bit more closely?
Gotcha.
And I tend to err on the side of conservative. If you're not sure if it's innovation or continuous improvement, it's continuous improvement. Like
Yeah.
you know, and don't set an innovation goal because people will then just come up with stuff to come up with stuff.
Mm.
That
Got to
set the
fulfill a
goal.
quota.
Yeah, set the goal of we want to do this really great for the market. We want to change and improve people's lives. What can we do and how can we do that? I haven't found somebody that goes, I love to hire people because they just sit there, you
Yes.
know? So, like, you hire really good people, let them be really good. When you give them that space, that's what you end up with.
David, this is fascinating, and I'm sure you and I could go on and geek out about this for hours. I have one last big question for you. In our intro call, you mentioned that, or you framed much of your recent kind of work and research as proving or disproving Clayton Christensen's theories of innovation. And so I have a very straightforward question for you. Was he right or was he wrong?
You know, I will say one of the biggest things that saddens me is the fact that I did not get an opportunity to talk with him before he passed. And it was just honestly a matter of months,
Oh, man.
unfortunately. But what I will say, I read an article, one of the last articles that he wrote was about how he could potentially be wrong and how his theory has existed for so long against time that it inherently must be wrong, that it's not innovative if it hasn't been innovated. And so part of my work was to, and I'll say that I innovate innovation kind of as an homage to him,
Hmm.
because as a theory, it holds true because it's never about stopping. He never talks about stopping. And
Yeah.
even if you go back to his books and things like that, the companies that he called innovative in his book published in 93 didn't innovate and are out of business now. Like General
Right.
Electric is one of the big ones that he talked about. And so, from that standpoint, as a theory and as an approach, he was right. In my opinion, he was right because it was never about stopping. And I don't believe that he ever did. And his personal work that he did um, after, when he stepped back from teaching and things like that was all about continually and perpetually living that theory and doing that work. And so, in my opinion, yeah. And his work is still extremely applicable. And anybody who hasn't read The Innovator's Dilemma, it's like 150 pages. It's a great read.
Oh my God. If you haven't read it, you must. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I would say if you're not innovating, if you're not thinking about disruption, and your competitors are, and you're already behind.
Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much for your time. If folks want to reach out to you or find you or read your book when it comes out, tell us Where do we find you? Where do we connect? Does the book have a title yet that we can look forward to?
It will be along the lines of, a practical application of disruptive innovation theory. That'll be in there somewhere.
Okay.
Again, as an homage to Christensen and his work. So it'll be somewhere in that. My company, the Free Group, thefreegroupllc.com, general information about me and ways that you can reach out and contact me there. I also love and do a lot of collaborating on LinkedIn, sharing ideas and a lot of the thinkers, much like yourself, Danny, sharing ideas and commenting on each other's work and really sharing podcasts and things. So that's a really great way to kind of engage with the conversation.
Awesome. Well, I will share links to all of those places when this gets posted. David, absolutely fascinating. I am really looking forward to reading your book. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Danny, it's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and looking forward to listening to more episodes.
Thank you. That's it for today. Thanks for tuning in to Innovate, Disrupt, or Die, the podcast. Join us again for our next episode, and don't forget to subscribe at innovatedisruptordie.com. That's all, folks.